New Jersey has the Jersey Devil. The Pacific Northwest has Bigfoot. Lake Champlain has a lake monster called Champ. West Virginia has the Mothman. And Pennsylvania has Squonk. Once I tell you about this cryptid, you will realize that we here in Pennsylvania are not okay. The squonk is a four-legged creature that supposedly resides in the hemlock forests of Pennsylvania. The squonk is just so hideously ugly that it spends all of its time weeping and even fears seeing its own reflection. Presumably, if you tried to catch a squonk, it will just turn into a puddle of tears. The squonk first appeared in a book called Fearsome Creatures of the Lumber Woods, written by William T. Cox and published in 1910. The premise of this book claimed to be essentially detailing the legends that lumberjacks tell each other around a campfire out in the woods. Mr. Cox described the squonk as follows.
The squonk. Lacrima corpus dissolvens. The range of the squonk is very limited. Few people outside of Pennsylvania have ever heard of the quaint beast, which is said to be fairly common in the hemlock forests of that state. The squonk is of a very retiring disposition, generally traveling about at twilight and dusk. Because of its misfitting skin, which is covered with warts and moles, it is always unhappy. In fact, it is said, by people who are best able to judge, to be the most morbid of beasts. Hunters who are good at tracking are able to follow a squonk by its tear-stained trail, for the animal weeps constantly. When cornered and escape seems impossible, or when surprised and frightened, it may even dissolve itself in tears.
And then the narrative gives a specific account of an instance in which a squonk was captured and subsequently dissolved. About 29 years later, in 1939, Henry H. Tryon would expand upon the squonk legend in his own book entitled Fearsome Critters. Much of the text is weirdly the same as Fearsome Creatures of the Lumber Woods, but even still, here are a few selections.
Probably the homeliest animal in the world, and knows it. Today, the squonk is met with solely in the hemlock forests of Pennsylvania. It is a most retiring, bashful, crepuscular animal, garbed in a loose, warty, singularly ill-fitting skin. The squonk is always unhappy, even morbid. He is given to constant weeping over his really upsetting appearance and can sometimes be tracked by his tear-stained trail. Moonlight nights are best for squonk hunts, for then the animal prefers to lie quiet in its hemlock home, fearing, should it venture forth, that it may catch a glimpse of itself in some moonlit pool. Sometimes you could hear one weeping softly to himself. The sound is a low note of pleading, somewhat resembling the call of the cross-feathered smee.
This illustration of a squonk is significantly more upsetting than the previous edition. There have been other published works after 1939 that reference the squonk, but they primarily pull their information from these two sources. So there's not really a specific description of where the squonk lives, just that it lives in the hemlock forest of Pennsylvania. But hemlock is actually our state tree, so there's kind of a lot of it here. But if you look at this 2019 map from the Pennsylvania Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, you can see that one of the largest concentrations of hemlock in the state is up in Allegheny County, specifically Allegheny National Forest. So I can only assume that this is prime squonk territory. The squonk is described as crepuscular, which is a word that I use a lot because I think it's fun, which means an animal that is primarily active at dawn and at dusk, like cats. I am not certain as to the approximate size of the squonk. In the original drawing and in subsequent fan art, it seems to be about the size of a small to medium pig. but even small pigs are incredibly heavy, and it would be hard to carry one in a sack, as the squonk capture is described in the legend. So I kind of think that perhaps the squonk is closer in size and weight to a medium dog. Now, you may be thinking, wow, I wonder what ancient squonk lore exists among Pennsylvanians. And here is the thing. Here is the bubble-bursting moment. There isn't any squonk lore. To be clear, there are also other creatures described in these books. I will name a few. The Snallygaster, which resembles a large crocodile covered with fur, but with no arms or legs and just a big spike in the middle of its back. The Funeral Mountain Pteroshot, which are creatures that live up in the mountains and grow in numbers until they decide to emigrate across the desert. But when they touch the hot sand, they explode. The Cactus Cat, which both looks like a cactus and a cat, and also drinks cactus sap until it is drunk. The Whirling Wimpus, which is basically a Bigfoot that spins around real fast like the Tasmanian devil. There are more, a lot more, and they're all pretty weird. I will put a link to an online version of the book down in the description box. If you attempt to research any of these animals, either you won't really be able to find anything, or any articles you do find will either use the phrases according to lumberjack lore, or they will refer back specifically to the Fearsome Creatures and Fearsome Critters books. The thing is, there is no lumberjack lore. It seems to me that Fearsome Creatures of the Lumberwoods was basically an early 1900s joke. More of a Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them than anything intended to be taken seriously. But now, more than 100 years later, that is no longer entirely clear. There are no interviews with the author, no clarifying tweets, no very obvious Lemony Snicket-style marketing campaign. It appears that the author, William Thomas Cox, was actually Minnesota's first state forester. And it is surprisingly hard to find solid information that corroborates that the William T. Cox, who was so invested in conservation efforts in Minnesota, was the same guy that wrote this book about weird fictional creatures. Because no actual historical accounts from legitimate Minnesota agencies that discuss this man mention anything about the book. For the most part, it is random blogs and a Goodreads blurb making this connection. However, I did find one official document called Historical Sketches of the Quatico Superior. I don't know how to pronounce that word, but I'll put it on the screen. And in this very long and formal yet rambling report, the author does include one page where he discusses local legends and he references William T. Cox as both the author of Fearsome Creatures of the Lumberwoods and Minnesota's first state forester and conservation commissioner. Considering that this report was requested by the U.S. Department of Agriculture and does appear to be on file with the University of Minnesota Forestry Library, I will assume that it is accurate. If I had to guess, I would say that this book about these ridiculous creatures who lived in the forests and were likely affected by deforestation was probably a very obvious joke coming from a man who dedicated his life to forest conservation efforts. And to make another slight leap, I kind of think that maybe he was trying to make lumberjacks, you know, the people responsible for deforestation, look very, very stupid. It's worth noting that no one in Pennsylvania really talks about the squonk. It seems like no one really knows about the squonk, which is sad. So now I think it is time to satiate your burning curiosity, to answer that one very obvious question. Is the squonk real? And I think it should come as no surprise that the answer is yes. The squonk is real. The squonk is very real. In fact, in preparation for this video, I went to Allegheny County and I caught a small squonk in this bucket. So, unrelated to the squonk, I did have an update that I wanted to mention. I will be changing my video upload schedule from weekly to every other week, and that is effective immediately, so there won't be a video next week. I just have like a lot going on, and this is in an effort to preserve my sanity and keep making videos fun for me. But I just want you to know that even if there won't be a new video next week, I will still be thinking of you. So if you're just going about your day, living your life, and you get a chill, it's me.